Radioactive Hudson, Indian Point, the record done. 60 years along the bed. The plan is closed, but not the end. The Hudson board, the daily waste, outfalls hidden, years erased. Permit signed, the crowd objected. Federal law kept it protected. Now old tag owns the side and tie. Fuel and waste, the slow expire. 45,000 gallons stored. The court unlocked the outlet door. Radioactive Hudson, burning core. Holtec claims the dose is short. 45,000 gallons sent away. The Hudson bears it day by day. What about day? The state declared the bill was passed, save the Hudson, make it last. But Holtec sued, the bench complied. The NRC will now decide. A law once meant to guard this stream was overruled in a legal scheme. Dolphin, surface, sturgeon, swam, milligram counts can't show their path. Radioactive Hudson, hurting core. Holtec claims the dose is short. Oh, 45,000 gallons sent away. The Hudson bears it by day by They call it common, done before. Wastewater carried to the shore. Environmentalists claim it's small, but none of that explains it all. The irony sharp, the ruling clear. Rights revised to serve Holtec here. Radioactive Hudson, hurting core. Holtec claims the dose is short. 45,000 gallons sent away. The Hudson bears it day by day. Say the Hudson, the voice is cold. The river bears the weight of from Buchanan to the Bay. Families live with what they say. 60 years the plant was run. The Hudson keeps what's been undone.
It was so awesome. I just love it. I put a link in the description so you can find that song. Hope you're doing well. So, what's the four pillars against humanity? What are the four things that the retards are using against humanity? The World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the military-industrial complexes. There's 4 basic things that they're using to rob you, to deny you, and to control you. The physicist behind net zero, Professor Miles Allen, he's the guy who came up with net zero. And so everybody's familiar with net zero. If you're watching this, you're probably very familiar, unfortunately. An interview with the father of global warming. This is Wallace Brocker, the hockey stick man. He wrote a single paper. Same as Miles Allen, Wallace Brocker wrote a single paper that got snatched up by United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and used to deny you and your loved ones and your planet any kind of future. A brief and frustrating history of the carbon footprint. The carbon footprint was a public relation campaign by BP Oil. And so the idea was to demonize you and then put the onus on you for the oil tankers that were derelict and shouldn't have been on the ocean in the first place, that were owned by BP Oil. And United Nations was so particular pink with that, they also used that particular technique. So you have net zero, you have climate change, global warming, and then you also have BP Oil, carbon footprint, and then James Hansen gave a single 15-minute presentation, and then global climate change. It was a turning point in the history of global climate change, and his testimony was pivotal and marked the official beginning of the global warming policy debate, which is a tax now on everything you do, right? So, because of James Hansen's paper, BP Oil's cover story, Wallace Brocker, and Miles Allen, all of those were used to triple and quadruple tax you in every facet of your life repeatedly before you get your paycheck and then when you try to spend it. And then also to control you and limit you and make it impossible for you to prosper and to have moments of solitude where you can get yourself a cottage or go camping with your loved ones. And so why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. Hence the reason of the poll tonight is endless radioactive fallout from 1,000+ nuclear fuel pools worldwide meant to poison all water and the biosphere, all the species. And so it's pretty easy to argue that's exactly what has taken place. That's what nuclear was all about in the first place. And the nuclear industry has a prolific amount of help to cover up their crimes. And so you probably heard people talking about flying on airplanes and comparing it to radiation fallout. Let's listen to James Hansen. Yeah, that's James Hansen.
Nuclear energy is harder for people to understand, the idea of radiation. I mean, radiation is natural. The Earth is bombarded by radiation.
But the stuff from a nuclear power plant is not. It's got nothing to do with that.
Radiation all the time. So the radiation that was released, for example, in 3 Mile Island, that exposed the accident at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, exposed residents nearby to radiation, which is equivalent to the amount of radiation that you get by flying in a commercial aircraft across the continent and back.
But you don't get radiation flying in an airplane. Radiation from a nuclear plant is something, it's a particle, you inhale it. It gets in your body, it pulses energy at 290,000 miles per second, and it destroys your chromosomes, your cells, your DNA. But you've heard many people like that over the years if you looked at the nuclear industry. This is a Veritasium. He's got 18 million subscribers. He goes to Fukushima and says is equal to that many bananas. And the fact is, a banana is not, the potassium is not from nuclear power plants. Japan picked up 30 million one-ton bags. He didn't go stand on those bags and say Dana is wrong, or he didn't try to debate these bags and say they're like a banana. He's got 18 million followers, so he's able to spread his message far and wide, and he's on all the platforms. And he's a doctor. He's a disgusting... Well, he's a predator is what he actually is. I like to see him spraying these regions at Fukushima. These people would have died within a few hours of doing that, or at least that night. On Saturday, there was an earthquake. Where it was off Fukushima Prefecture. They said, but they said it was off Iwate, which is down here. The Fukushima Daiichi plant, it was straight off that. That's the latitude and longitude that they gave out. It was right there. On Tuesday, they said it was up by Minamasoma. Another earthquake, which happened to be almost in the exact same place, but 30 kilometers off the nuclear power plants, which are destroyed. Very fragile, and are most likely have a huge plume coming our way because of it. And it gets worse. The latitude and longitude puts it right off the plant itself. And the problem is the reactors are very fragile. They're non-existent, but they're also very fragile. They're nuclear meltdowns. And they lost around 9 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings. It was 4 of these buildings, all in a row, lost their entire inventories, which is around 36 reactor cores. Japan announced that the cooling system was restored at the fuel pools number 1 to 4. And they redirect you over to reactor 5. So this is 190-foot buildings. This is 1/4 of the height of the building. And they're 150 feet wide. They're 19 stories tall. So when you look at these buildings, it's you don't need to be an architect or engineer to comprehend that the fuel pools, which were at the top of the buildings, are no longer, have been lost. And we're talking about 18 reactor cores, and each reactor core was pure uranium, pure plutonium. So it was equal to 100 Chernobyls. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor, it was a new reactor, it was a small reactor. And this is much more volatile fuel. Now, Chernobyl was still brutal. On March the 16th, on day 5, Frank von Hippel, a professor, was interviewed on MSNBC, I believe it is, some scumbag media. And at this time, there was a lot of uncertainties because you had all these. Picture was on the 15th. You had 4 reactors in a row detonate. And the fuel pool were gone. And so they were trying to cover it up, but shortly after this, they went all in. But this interview got out. And this interview is really important. Ignore the media. Just listen to the statement that he's going to make.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods would likely be...
How many fuel rods is a very deceptive, because it's fuel assembly.
Inside that reactor, what sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard. What kind of quantity are we talking about in the fuel pools?
Different numbers, ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. No, two
in each building.
To about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right.
So it could be 8 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings, and the buildings actually don't even exist. So they put these covers contraptions. You'll never see that picture anywhere else, by the way. They put this contraption over the stumps and then pretended that they were at the top of a building that doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
And so they're pretending they're on top of a building. This is the media. Don't think of the so-called journalists. Don't forget them either, but don't think of them. Think it's CBS, biggest media in the United States, BBC, the biggest media in Europe, CNN, one of the biggest medias worldwide, and ABC Australia, the biggest on that continent, had to participate for that law to work. And all the universities and all the other medias had to participate in the law, had to know it was a lie and know not to come out and contradict it for that law to work worldwide. Do you understand the significance of what I'm just saying? All of your medias and universities have conspired to deny you the ability to rationalize what happened and the significance of it. So the building was stripped down with remote control cranes and as many homeless as they can get their hands on and dispose of. They don't physically touch each other. And so the contraption you see in there is just panels. You see the big white panel there? They're held by gravity, and there's 2 on each side. This is built off-site and then reassembled. The media comes out and tells you like a banana and a potato chip and granites and flying on an airplane are all of them at one time. It has nothing to do with that. It's so dishonest, it's so deceptive, but that's what all your universities regurgitate constantly. That's all the pundits from the nuclear industry regurgitate. All the lapdogs and cheerleaders and bootlickers for the industry regurgitate. And they get fistful of cash for doing it. Mega views on top of that, so they get huge money on advertisement. One Fukushima may destroy the whole country, investigating chairman. Collapse of a whole country is possible. And just an example of that, so this is 2025 map of, there's 20 countries that still block half of Japan's food, half the country, because of the radioactive fallout. It used to be 55, and the people that done that got replaced. The radiation, however, covered the entire planet, not just Japan. And this model is Neptunium-239. And if you look up the decay chain of Neptunium-239, it decays at 50% every 2.5 days. It does that 10 times. So in 25 days, all the Neptunium-239 you're looking at has decayed to plutonium-239, which has 24,000 year plus half-lives. And there's 10 half-lives. So it's going to be around a little longer than Miriam. Does it make sense so far? Bear with me. I smurfed up. It's not such a bad smurf up though, by the way. Hang on, mom's back there. Okay, so plutonium, which covered the entire planet, by the way, that's a 20-day radioactive fallout, and is not based upon is not based upon the loss of the inventories. As you know, the media pretended that they were on top of the building, so there could be no loss, right? The same thing for reactor 3. They've done the same thing. And they ignored reactor 1 and 2, which also lost their inventories. Don't forget what Frank found. There was 8 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings, and they lost, that's 36 reactor cores. Okay. So the plume you're looking at is not based upon the actual inventories. It's based on a small number, a fraction of the inventories. Actually, a fraction of a percent of the inventories that were lost. This is gigantic. There's over 3 decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings. And there's typically around 6 reactor cores put into fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings every decade. And it's usually a decade and a half, 2 decades before you can take it out of the fuel pool and put it in a cast. So saying 8 reactor cores at the top of plus the reactor core, 9 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings is being conservative. You're lowballing that number. So in the radioactive studies of plutonium, for instance, on beagle dogs, 144 in this case, death from radiation occurred 1.5 to 5.4 years. So they all died within 5 years. Tumors of the lungs, the skeleton, and the liver occurred beginning about 3 years after the exposure. So 3 tumors. Bone tumors, skeleton tumors, found in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death, which is a terrible, 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 terrible way to leave this world, is bone tumors. Lung tumors in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death, and liver tumors. So if you get plutonium, in other words, if you breathe the air on this planet in the last 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years, you got plutonium. All the dogs died. Tumors in these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal and were competing causes of death. So 3 tumors were competing causes of death. These findings, it's much more complicated, that your immune system is compromised, you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. These findings in dogs suggest similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to plutonium. You're not accidentally exposed, this is on purpose. They built the reactors on the tectonic plates with a 3,000-year history of tsunamis and earthquakes, massive ones. But it was discovered that the human kidneys are 50 times less efficient than the animal kidneys at removing the plutonium. So you're 50 times more susceptible than the animals, and they all died. And the biggest problem is this was the United States Navy Research Institute, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute, New Mexico. Curium isotopes are major byproducts in the irradiated nuclear fuel. Forget about the alpha for a minute, or forever. It's the biggest byproduct of the irradiated fuel rod. And curium isotopes requires lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium. And plutonium killed all the animals, right? Okay. Washed up work on the Belgium beach. Autopsy couldn't find the cause of the emaciated whale. Autopsy could not find the cause of the death, and they show you these pictures. Well, that's rib cages. That's the shoulder blade. That's a peanut head. That's severe, and I mean severe, emaciation you're looking at. And this was predicted in 2014. Killer whales will exceed 1,000 atoms a kilogram of radioactive cesium, but it's not just cesium. Like, it doesn't work that way. But that's the cover story they've been using for 80 years, and they're sticking to it. Those rib cages should never exist because a killer whale is the apex predator. It eats over 240 different species. It snacks on everything. This was a xenon model covering the entire planet. 20 days to your top left-hand corner. This was June 26, 2025. Her condition has been struggling. From her condition, she may have been struggling to feed for a while. They're talking about a killer whale that washed up in New Zealand. As soon as you see the tail, you know this animal's emaciated. But you can kind of see the peanut head in that particular shot. You can see the rib cage in that shot. And you can see the rib cage in this shot. You can see this is a very flat killer apex predator. It's emaciated. It's severely emaciated. It has the peanut head. The gray whales are all emaciated. There's 14,000 died post-Fukushima. And they say they're poor condition due to changing feeding conditions. Well, these are migratory whales that have been doing a migratory run for millions of years. They've raised millions of generations of whales for millions of years. The food just doesn't change and go somewhere else. Everything is a pattern that has been going on long before the human experience. The whales were already in poor shape last fall when they began their 12,000-mile migration to breeding. They were already emaciated. In fact, what they're seeing are extremely emaciated, and they have bulging ribs with shoulder blades and the vertebrae visible even from the shoreline. This is something we've never conceived or heard of. And last year on a 12,000-mile migratory run, there was no babies survived it. This year, they're still severely emaciated and they're dropping dead everywhere. They're trying to blame it on ship strikes and other constructs to protect the nuclear industry because they want a nuclear renaissance. They got the same gigawatts now as they had in the 90s. There is no nuclear renaissance. There is no small modular reactors. There's no fusion reactors. There's nothing in the pipeline. There's no applications into the regulatory agencies that have any kind of merit. This plume model is based on, cesium is based on 26 days. The radioactive fire covers the whole planet. It's reactor 3 p.m. detonation. And we're seeing these same attributes in all the species of the whales. In fact, the gray whales will be gone by next year or early the following year. They're all emaciated. This is year 2. They're not going to make it another year. You have unusual mortalities for all the species. Mink whales, right whales. Marine researchers shocked as unprecedented number of whale carcasses wash up on the western shores. This is a marker of sperm whales. We just had 3 sperm whales up to St. Lawrence, way up to St. Lawrence where they don't belong, and are severely emaciated. I mean severe emaciation. And of course, the scientist says they can't go there. They want the natives who live there to tow the whales to wherever they feel like. In other words, an impossible task so they don't have to perform necropsy. When they can easily fly there, low tide, go out and do a necropsy, but they won't do it. Humpback whales, unusual mortality. All the humpback whales are emaciated. This was an interesting story that showed up in 2023. Explosion of sea lion deaths during the deadly bird flu outbreak, which was another construct. It was meant to cover up. This is not bird flu you're looking at. This is the most severe emaciated whale I've ever seen, besides the other one they showed me, which is this one. You're talking about 3,500 emaciated whales. You're trying to conflate it with bird flu when this is not what bird flu does. This is starvation over extended periods of time. I've never seen that. I was a commercial diver for 14 years, 6 hours a day on the ocean floor. I've never seen nothing like that. I've dove with these endless times. I've been under the ocean admiring these animals. I can't tell you how many times. I can't possibly articulate how many times I was in awe, or how many times I had to drop my weight belt because they charged me. And you don't understand that. The reason they do that is because sea lions will go underwater and they'll expel air at each other. And whoever runs out of air first goes to the surface is the loser. I'm a commercial diver with a hookah system, air hoses, or dive tanks. I'm down there for 6 hours at a time. To them, a lot of them, that's just a challenge. They see all these bubbles and they have a a reaction to that, right? Climate change likely played a role in the 40% drop of the population of the gray whales. This was a couple of years back. 14,000 died post-Fukushima. There's 13,000 left, and there's severe emaciation. So no food. At that point in 2022, it was 10,350 had died post-Fukushima. Now it's 14,000. 8 dead sperm whales found. I never heard of anything like that before. 6 dead sperm whales on another beach. These were all emaciated. Never heard of that before. And we just had 3, as I told you, just up the coast from me, in the interior, up in a place where it should never be in any circumstances. And severe emaciation is in a PEI in the St. Lawrence. How scientists discovered 7,000 humpback whales had dead was on top of an unusual mortality event of emaciated whales. They all died of starvation. And the consensus is if you're unlucky, or lucky, whatever you want to look at it, you'll find about 10% of the bodies. So then you multiply it by 10 to get how many died. Too much junk food. This was the Cassini auklets. This is a really important story. I was on research expeditions for 6 years, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And at that time, there was 2 mass die-off of seabirds. There was more than that, but there was 2 big ones that got a lot of attention. There was the common murres. It was over 1 million had died and all their nesting grounds had failed on top of that. So a bigger casualty than just the million birds, because they would have laid 2, 3, 4 eggs each, right? It was over 1 million had died. In talking about the breeding colony, the genetic spear selections had died off, and at the same time there was all kinds of shearwaters and other species, kittiwakes and stuff like that. But it was over 1 million confirmed common murres. And what makes the common murres so important is they dive 600 feet all day. And they feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill, small species, right? There was 1.4 million Cassini auklets died at the same time, and they feed on microscopic animals. Their main source is zooplankton, a shade bigger than phytoplankton. So you had 2 different species, or 2 species that feed at different spectrums of the food chain, very important spectrums of the food chain, the microscopic animals and the small animals, right? Which is the benefit of the microscopic animals, including, so they're basically skimmers, they eat microscopic animals. So to have 2 different spectrums of the food chain showing up emaciated, over 1 million each, 1.4 million for the Cassini auklets, and 1 million for the common murres, but there was other species at the same time. That is real. That's telling you the food chain is broken. That's not perhaps, it's not maybe. After the auklet die-off, 4 more mass mortality events involving seabirds took place, occurring farther north each time. Murres, puffins, of course, they had found something like 100 puffins. They estimated half the populations of puffins would have had died. Because in a 10-year research, they were lucky if they found 3 or 4. So to find 100 in a short area, and they were all emaciated. Most recently, short-tailed shearwaters, northern fulmars. And the northern fulmars, I have very fond memories of them being out on the ocean in the thick fog. We get 127 days average a year of fog here. And that would be one of the few birds which show up, and they're very special birds. They're very funny, very adorable birds. They run underwater, and they're magic. The way they hover right over the ground swells and the waves, and they duck and weave, and they're just incredible, beautiful, amazing. All the species are certainly. But it's one that I have very fond memories of my whole childhood out on the ocean. Experiencing similar fate as the auklet as far north as the Truckee Sea. Well, there is no limit on the radiation fallout. This is a 24-day depiction of a spike of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137. And for every cesium-137, there's 100 strontium-90s produced. And cesium-137 pulses energy 600 feet every second at 290,000 miles a second, almost the speed of light. International Atomic Energy Agency's public trust is key to projects using radioactive soil from Fukushima. This was Anna Clark. The International Atomic Energy Agency, United Nations, is not a regulator and not in a position to judge or approve Japan's radiation soil, water, or anything else, or anybody else's. They're not a regulatory agency, they're a construct. And what I just showed you is why I don't have a website anymore and why I don't even have a phone anymore. It's because I bring you this type of information that you're never going to find anywhere else. And I do it because it's got to be done. Not because it's easy or not because it's fun, because it's not. When you're sitting here and you're getting these shows ready, it's gut-wrenching. And when you sit there and try to tell a story, you got to pretend that, okay, I'm just going to calm down and just tell the story and then cry myself to sleep again. Cassandra was forced to undergo chemo, died at 22. They do the same thing here in Canada, children. Court-ordered chemotherapy, court-ordered, because she was under 19 at the time, was forced by the Connecticut courts as a teenager to undergo chemo and radiation therapy, by the way. A judge ordered her to undergo chemotherapy and radiation therapy for her Hodgkin's cancer after she refused treatment, saying she didn't want to poison her body. So the court said, because the nuclear industry is so powerful, right, they changed the laws and the courts had to force her to get the radiation and the chemicals into her body. And if you go out and ask any doctor, what's the odds you're going to use chemo without radiation, they'll tell you 0. You're guaranteed you're going to get, they're never going to get just one. A juvenile court, in fact, they might do just chemo and they say, well, that's not going to work, you're going to die. And you say, well, there's got to be something else. And you say, well, there is radiation. And desperation, your loved ones, or the courts will steal your child and pump them full of that until they're ready to die and then send them home so you can cry your arse and your tears out thinking you done everything you could when you didn't. They never gave you a chance, and they never gave her a chance. A juvenile court judge removed Callender, who was 17 at the time, from her home, placed her on her guard, armed guard, in the Connecticut's Children's Medical Center. And her case went to the state Supreme Court and was ruled that the department wasn't violating her rights. Of course they are. No one got a right to pump chemicals and radiation in your body unless the nuclear industry had changed the rules and regulations and made it that way, which is exactly what happened. In Canada, it's the exact same thing. They'll steal your child. Doctors eventually implanted a port into her daughter against her will to administer death. They call it treatment, is death. As her mother said, I raised her to be a fighter, and that's what she was. She went through hell. She never had a life. She never had a chance. And I hold every doctor and nurse who touched her. The DCF and the courts, I hold everyone responsible for her death. And so there's a lot of people profit off this misery. Veritasium is just one of the many, but he's one of the worst by far. And see, because he looks like a good-looking guy. He looks like a nice, healthy guy. He's very, very wealthy. He's got 18 million subscribers. He can put anything out now, and it's gone viral on every social media out there. And he made videos, and he compared everything to bananas. He refused to acknowledge what happened. In the United States, was 500,000 times normal levels. There's no such thing as normal. there is no safe level of radiation. So everything is polluted before Fukushima. 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry, nuclear dumping, nuclear testing, nuclear weapons. 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging, splitting atoms into your environment. 1,000 fuel pools splitting atoms directly into your environment. And then they got all of these puppets, these heartless, soulless monsters, sadistic demons out there telling you that it's harmless and innocuous and benign. If that doesn't terrify you, I'm not sure what actually does. And then when you look at the poll tonight, when you look at that poll tonight, 1,000 fuel pools are splitting atoms. What does that mean, though? Well, each reactor core, there could be 8 in each fuel pool. Each reactor core is still splitting atoms for 1 million homes and businesses. In Japan, they're growing food right alongside the nuclear plant in the nuclear wasteland, surrounded by 30 million one-ton bags of radioactive fallout where they can't live in it, harvesting food. As you see, they're not wearing paper suits, which can't protect you. So why is almost every nuclear power plant you look at surrounded? To suck up the radiation from the fuel pools, from the tall, skinny stacks, not the water towers, but the tall, skinny stacks. See those skinny stacks down there? They're hemorrhaging radiation into all this farm. Because they can't contain the radiation. Once you take it out of the reactor core, there's no containment. So each reactor is boiling off, each fuel pool is boiling off about 120,000 liters a day. It's not a coincidence that almost every single nuclear plant on the planet is surrounded by farms, and that the fuel pools have no containment. So where does the radiation go? A huge amount will land right there because it's mixed with water. The rest of it will cover the entire planet. You have 1,000 plumes every day after 30 days. So when you first build a nuclear power plant and 12 months, 14 months later, you take out 1/3 of the reactor core, you put it in a fuel pool. So after 30 days, it covers the whole planet in a full plume. You have 1,000 fuel pools doing that worldwide, and they're poisoning your food source right at the source by building these disease factories, because that's what nuclear is. It's a disease factory, right? The radioactive fallout. There's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Do you think this is a coincidence that almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms as far as you can see? And most people have no concept of what I'm saying. Even now, it's hard to comprehend the enormity of how evil what I'm talking about actually is. They know the difference. They know the food sucks up the radiation. They know the strawberry sucks up the radiation, the grapes suck up the radiation. But they've done tens of millions of studies on food, and it all sucks up radiation. And so when you eat it, you're bioaccumulating it. Your body attacks every single atom for the rest of your life with white blood cells and builds tumors around it. See all of these studies? That's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of a percent of a percent of what I have gathered up myself. The reason almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms is because that's the best way to poison you near and far. And then they're attacking the water on our planet because the radiation covers the entire planet. And by proxy, it destroys the essence of life, which is water. Your most precious, your best friend on this planet is water. In all your times of crisis, to get any kind of relief, where do you head to? You head to the bathroom, you splash your face, you jump in the shower. You get off work, you jump in the shower. You have all that water, and you always say the same thing, oh my goodness, thank goodness. Or oh my God, thank you so much. You should be saying, oh my water, thank you so much. 55 countries banned the food for a decade from the nuclear wasteland, and 14 prefectures, which is half the country. They got a big typhoon now, going to wash the radiation off Japan into the ocean again. It's still hemorrhaging out of there. The maximum sustained winds with gusts reaching 234 kilometers an hour, which is 145 miles per hour. Is the building codes for houses and buildings in your area designed to take 145 mile per hour winds? I bet you the answer is no. You know why? Because before Fukushima, we didn't have that coming ashore. Super typhoon, supercell cyclones, supercell hurricanes. Post-Fukushima, that's a thing. Before Fukushima was an extraordinary event. During the nuclear industry's releases, during all the nuclear testing, we spread so much radiation where we're seeing this again. Before the nuclear industry existed, we weren't seeing that. Before the nuclear industry, our planet was absolutely peppered with species and life. It was magic. A glass of water would have 1 billion creatures. A glass of water now is sterile. Fukushima, the nuclear industry would take it out anyway with the radioactive fallout from 1,000 fuel pools, but Fukushima was a pulse event. It was 36 reactor cores, massive reactor cores of pure uranium plutonium, and reactor 3 was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor, which is catastrophic isotopes for every species, including you. And look how big these monster storms are. They're massive. Strong enough to topple buildings. Well, if anybody knows anything about wind, is that there are places in your country or your community where the wind can always be a lot stronger, right? So there's places where it's going to hit 350 kilometers per hour. Africa's largest freshwater lake could be the site of Kenya's nuclear power plant. This is the same old story with the nuclear industry. They destroy your water and your farms. And by proxy, they destroy you and the species. Coal to Nuclear, International Atomic Energy Agency, which was quasi-electric, came out a few years back and said, we can take geothermal and replace coal plants, oil plants, and gas plants. Nuclear industry was like, oh crap, we need small modular reactor story, and say, we're going to do it. But you know who's going to win that battle? It's going to be quasi-electric geothermal. It won't be small modular reactors, and it won't never be fusion. Nuclear energy stands as an essential pillar for delivering affordable low carbon. There is no such thing as low carbon. Nuclear is the dirtiest technology in human history. The resource is the most resource-intensive industry in human history. Just bear with me. To call nuclear carbon-free is just an egregious betrayal. Look how low carbon that is. Look at this place, low carbon. This is only half the site. It's the biggest construction site in human history. Would you like to pay the power bill there for one day? Every piece of metal there is triply inspected. 3 different inspectors will inspect everything that goes on that site. They have enough cement on that site to build a sidewalk all the way to Rome. The site is completely saturated with rats. And they already have all the insulation pipes and electrical ran. And the rats will just chew the shit out of that. That's a disaster waiting to happen. And it might never work. You're talking around $50 billion on top of that. And then they're going to spend $100 million a year just on maintenance. I've done research expeditions for 6 years. And the species to your left now are exterminated, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. What would you rather have, nuclear power or beautiful species? Insects. There used to be 30,000 insects at the high tide line. I went back 6 years to see if the species recovered. The species didn't recover, so that means they're gone. That means it's an extinction event. If you look at a nuclear power plant from space, this is what you're going to see. And each reactor core, and there's could be 8 at the top of these buildings, boiling water reactor 1 buildings. So each one of them are splitting atoms for 1 million homes and businesses into all of these farms. Do you think that's an accident? And when you compare potassium to anthropogenic man-made radiation, potassium is 71 10 millionths of a curie per gram. A curie is 37 billion atoms, but they're anthropogenic man-made atoms, not natural stuff. So 37 billion times 140 to get a gram of strontium-90. And potassium-40 a gram is 0.000071 curies per gram. Curies 37 billion. But see, potassium is not a harmful isotope. It's not really an isotope in the context of nuclear. They conflated them, right? They married them together to confuse you. It's a very successful technique. Because the way bioaccumulation goes up the food chain, when you started eating it, or the birds, or the whales, or animals, it's catastrophic. So when you look at these buildings, do you really think that nothing got out of there? This is a professor at the Department of Nuclear Quantum Engineering at CAS, which is the Korean Nuclear Institute, one of the most prestigious ones in South Korea. And he says the 1.37 million tons of wastewater at Fukushima was equal to 2.2 grams of tritium. 2.2 grams. And if you dumped everything out of these reactors into the ocean, it was equal to 3 grams of sugar. So when you got my video there and you got a professor of quantum and nuclear engineering, most people are going to watch his stuff, not my stuff. And in reactor 2, the one in the middle, they spent $48 million to get less than a gram. And they used this contraption they built, like a fishing rod, and they lower it down, and it just goes like this. It just grabs, they pull it back up, they bring it in, they hope they got a sample of the fuel. That's their story. They could have got all the samples they want off of these destroyed buildings. And they certainly could have got all the samples they ever wanted out of these buildings. And James Lucid had put out a song called Less Than a Gram. I'm going to play it. It's a beautiful song. If you got headphones, you're going to love it. It's still a great song without it. And I'll be right back. I just got to listen to a great song.
Right beside old Unit 3 sits a shell-marked waste you see. Tanks of resin stacked with care, holding what the pumps caught there. TEPCO field, two plans to show. One says yes, the other no. Each awaits a coming call. Neither clears the path at all. Less than a gram, that's what they've got from Unit 2, and that was a lot. Fuel remains in buried rooms while they measure water plumes. Early 30s, so they say, when the work might get underway. Decommission down the line, mid-century's hopeful sign. 880 tons remain, none retrieved from 3's domain. They debate what space to claim, still